Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at the 2024 AERO Friedrichshafen press conference. My name is Andre Castro. I am the Director of Communications for GAMA. Today we've got a lot to kind of cover, as well as a panel. I'd like to briefly go over the agenda. We're going to start out talking about the importance of GA, followed by industry updates and a panel discussion regarding accelerating the development of electric aviation sector in Europe, followed by some Q&A, and then we'll kind of be done for the day. I would like to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. It's GAMA Chairman and President and CEO of AERO, Chuck Whibley.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm very happy to be here in Friedrichshafen for the 30th anniversary of AERO. It is my first AERO ever. I've never been to it before, and it's quite the show. I'm very impressed, and it's a lot of fun. It's an honor to be here as GAMA Chairman as well. We represent over 150 companies around the world, and made up of general aviation airplanes, manufacturers of general aviation aircraft, rotorcraft, engines, avionics, components and related services and technologies. We're all here today to learn about what the latest and greatest is, and so let's get into it. And we'll start with the importance of general aviation. So we all have a passion for aviation, and it's important that we always remember and share the important role that it plays within society throughout Europe and around the globe. GA provides our communities with numerous important services, including farming and agriculture, pilot training, emergency services such as air ambulances, police services, and something near and dear to me, firefighting, as well as missions such as medical transportation and cargo for emergency. And those that are familiar with me know that we have a lot to do with the fire boss, which is on the lower left there. As an industry, I believe that we should be able to communicate how much we're helping the environment by fighting wildfires, and we can't do that today, so we should work on that. So, as I mentioned before, the industry also provides point-to-point air mobility, connecting people and businesses everywhere at all times. So it's an essential part of our global and local economies, from jobs, direct and indirect benefits to all of society. Incubator of safety, sustainability, and innovation. This is a very important theme for us, as we are where this technology has started from. Safety, sustainability, innovation, it all starts here with general aviation. It can be seen across the spectrum of fixed-wing, rotorcraft, advanced air mobility vehicles. Product developments and improvements are built from technological advancements in materials, structures, avionics, new propulsion methods, wing design, fly-by-wire controls, additive manufacturing, and of course sustainable aviation fuels. So the technologies that our industry is working on will advance general aviation and pave the way for broader acceptance into the aerospace industry. It's important to note that the industry's ability to introduce innovative technologies and sustainable products into the market depend on having an effective, reliable, and supportive regulatory and business environment in place. Without this, it's really hard to get these new innovations out to the marketplace. Our industry has been proven to be very resilient and eagerly awaits the opportunities that are coming this way and meet the challenges coming ahead as well. So with that, Pete, you're up. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Very quickly, want to give a short industry update and talk about some of the specific parts of the industry that we're looking at here in Europe. So if we look at deliveries that we announced just a few weeks ago in DC, across all segments, this industry is humming along. We're up in pistons, up in turboprops, slightly up in jets, and in rotorcraft, up very dramatically. What was really special for us to be able to announce is the fact that for the first time in a very long time, we were able to deliver 4,000 aircraft across the board globally, which is very significant. And for the first time, business aviation delivered over $20 billion product. But that's not to say that there aren't storm clouds out there. And one of the things that I think is very significant to note, that folks took note of when we announced these numbers back in February was the fact that in Europe right now, traditionally our deliveries of business aviation aircraft were about 20% of the global market. Last year we were down to 12%. Last year we delivered only 88 business jets to Europe. That is the lowest number of business jets that we have delivered since we started tracking it by geographic segment over 15 years ago. We have to pay attention to that. And there are things that are driving those numbers, and we'll talk about that in a second. So if we go on to the next slide, and we look at our priorities that we have for our GAMA Brussels office, I'm very proud of the fact that you'll get to talk with, or three of them will get to talk to you today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Joanne's contribution as well. But our Brussels office is extremely active, and we've got a lot of significant events that are coming up this year, not to mention the fact that we have a new director of EASA, so we're getting a chance. I'll have my first opportunity to meet Florian next week. We have David Solar with us today. He'll be up on the panel, but he's been a great partner with us. Joanne Sierra on our staff has been working hard with David and David's FAA counterparts to be able to go really re-energize our rotorcraft subcommittee. Our new committee chairman for that subcommittee is constituted from Airbus helicopters. And working there, but as well as working with EASA on the EU's Alliance for Zero Aviation Emissions. So Joanne is doing some yeoman's work in that category. One of the things that we emphasize, as my chairman just said, is our sector is a technology incubator. But if you attack our sector, business and general aviation, what you do is you debilitate our ability to drive towards sustainable aviation in the future. I'll talk more about that in just a second. It's very important for us, as I mentioned for those of you at the press conference yesterday, the importance of the book and claim model for Europe. The deployment strategy that Europe has for SAF that Kyle will talk about in a second is such that it does not allow availability for business aviation, and a book and claim is a smart way to allow people that have the economic means to pay the expanded price differential for sustainable aviation fuel to have access to it. And the current strategy that the European Commission is moving forward with does not allow us that capability that we have on the other side of the Atlantic, and it just doesn't make sense. The last important thing is validation and rulemaking on both sides of the Atlantic. Our ability to we deliver product globally, and for European companies to be able to go and access the markets in the US and in Canada and Brazil are just as important as those manufacturers in those countries being able to access the market here. And we work very hard with our partners in EASA and the FAA to try to improve the validation process and be able to deliver these products efficiently globally and not have a lag time when product is certified in one region or the other. Next slide. I want to emphasize how important, again, back to the point of the decreasing market share that we're selling in Europe. Look at this vote in the European Parliament recently that we just won by a very, very slim margin. This was to ban business jets in Europe. And that margin, that vote margin, 282 in favor against 300 against, that is not the kind of odds I ever like to go forward with. Now we have European parliamentary elections coming forward. We will have, obviously we have new players working with us in the Commission, the European presidency as we move forward. We have a lot of work to do with the industry and the new parliament, and we will talk about that in the next panel to be able to go and emphasize how our segment in the industry, the technology incubators, will go ahead and drive our goal of net zero by 2050. Without our integrated supply chains and that our new aviation companies, whether it's Lilium, Volocopter, what H55 is doing, all of our companies, they can't succeed without the integrated supply chain, and business aviation is a key element in that. So, next slide. With that, I'd like to go and pass over to our head of European Affairs in our Brussels office, Tom Martin. Thanks, go.
Thank you, Pete. So as Pete said, We are all committed in the GAMA membership and across the business and general aviation sector towards achieving our targets of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The biggest contributor to that is sustainable aviation fuels. We'll touch on some of the other elements, technologies later in the panel discussion, but SAF is the key enabler to allow the current and future fleets in Europe and beyond to decarbonise at pace. Unfortunately, we face some challenges getting access to that fuel. In Europe, Europe has passed the Refuel EU Aviation Regulation, which enters force this year, which mandates SAF at large airports, which you think is a good thing, and that's all fine for the airlines. But our problem is, where do business and general aviation aircraft travel to and from? It's not always the Frankfurts and Munich airports of this world. It's the smaller airports. Around 2,000 airports in Europe are used daily by business and general aviation. So the question is, how do we get SAF to those airports? Either physically, or, as Pete mentioned, through book and claim. And we're doing a lot of heavy advocacy in partnership with other organisations in Brussels to try and convince the European Commission and the EU member states to recognise a book and claim system. But in parallel, earlier this year, GAMA, in partnership with the European Business Aviation Association, EBA, published our SAF plan for Europe for business aviation. This is essentially giving a demand signal to the SAF fuel providers in Europe and beyond of the levels and volumes of SAF that we need at airports for business and general aviation to achieve our decarbonisation goals. Because to be frank, business and general aviation operators do not have the buying capacity that large airlines have, who can buy billions of gallons or litres of SAF in one purchase agreement. We represent large and diverse operators, hundreds of them across Europe and beyond, so we need to make sure that they have access to the SAF. So we published, as I said, in January this year, this SAF plan for Europe, and we're continuing to work in partnership with the business aviation operating community, the fuel community, and the airports to make sure that SAF is available and we can achieve our decarbonisation goals. Next slide, please. So just want to highlight our close partnership with our regulators and highlight a success story. It's easy for us as manufacturers in the industry to complain about our regulators, but I want to highlight one example of success we've had recently, because we're going to be talking a lot about during this show and also other events over the coming months and as we approach the Paris Olympics. Urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, innovative air mobility, eVTOLs, call it what you will. There's a lot of acronyms out there. I'm not going to try and define them all today, but just last week the European Commission adopted EASA's operation, pilot licensing, airspace integration and UAS certification rules for this new emerging sector, which will enable all these companies to start operations as soon as this year. I just want to highlight this in particular because it's an example of where industry and regulators can work together, develop a performance-based rule that allows the flexibility for different types and categories and product systems to come together and work with industry to identify a way of achieving those very high safety targets that we're all massively focused on, but also allowing industry to find the most appropriate ways to deliver that. If we talk about simple things like energy reserves for battery electric aircraft, it's quite easy to just simply say, well, it must be 45 minutes, same as the IFR requirements today. Well, that's not necessarily practical and not really achievable for many manufacturers in this emerging sector because of the different specificities of battery technology. This new rule, as I said, is adopted now. EASA is also currently consulting on its acceptable means of compliance. We've had a lot of good collaboration between our manufacturer members who are working in this sector and the agency to develop those means of compliance which are going to enable this sector to operate and thrive in Europe and kind of set the benchmark for other regulators around the world. With that, I would like to hand over to Kate Warren, our Director of Safety and Sustainability Development in Europe, to talk about GAMA's European workforce efforts.
Good morning again, everyone. So I would like to talk about one of the pieces of my job title, which is sustainability. We all know we work hard at GAMA for the environmental impact. We work hard for the economical impact, but we also work hard for the social sustainability of our sector. And that part of the impact that we want to emphasize here is all the actions that GAMA do in Europe here. Those are the two initiatives that I would like to highlight today. The first one is GAMA is the original and biggest partner of AERO. AERO Aviation for All is an association that is solely focusing on promoting diversity and inclusion in the aviation sector. One of the biggest events that we have is the Aviation for Girls event. That is taking place, we have the 3rd edition in 2024, taking place at Eurocontrol in Brussels. And basically it's more than 100 kids coming from more than 20 countries to discover aviation. And the 3rd edition taking place in Brussels will be on the 25th of October. And we're really proud to support it. And I think this is definitely the way we want to continue supporting the diversity initiative of AERO. The other part of what we do with GAMA for the sustainability and supporting the workforce is the generalaviation.eu platform that was created a few years ago. We are still building it, it's an ongoing process, and on that platform this year we want to focus on the career tool that was created. That career tool is a game. It's a game because we want this to be fun. We want the young generation to go on that platform and discover what is the scope of job that we can do. Working for aviation is not only being a pilot, it's so much more, and we want to show them that. And the goal for that tool is to continue opening that scope and that views for the young generation and make sure they know how exciting it is to work in our sector. So if you have any questions on those two activities, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty sure most of you in the room have my email. So I will close that part of our presentation now and leave the floor to Peter Martin, the Director for European Government Affairs and the latest in the staff, in the GAMA staff. The latest,
Thank you, Kate. Before we dive into a panel discussion that we've organized around a very important and interesting new GAMA publication, I'd like to give you the background on this publication. So we've been working with many European GAMA OEMs over the past couple of months to develop a new policy paper, a white paper, that we're going to put forward for the new European Commission and the new European Parliament, which will be taking office later this year, and we're really excited about this paper. It contains a lot of very detailed recommendations on creating the appropriate funding environment to encourage OEMs to thrive, for the electric aviation sector to thrive in Europe. It contains recommendations on strengthening supply chains to ensure that that we have certainty, market certainty, and manufacturing is as easy as possible. And it also contains a lot of recommendations on the good policy measures that have been put in place over the last 5 years, what needs to be continued, and what needs to potentially be changed over the next coming 5-year period of the legislative cycle. We're really excited to share this paper with all of you. It's going to be something we're going to be referencing over the next couple of years quite a lot, especially as we engage with the European Parliament and the European Commission and member states. And to kind of touch on some of the key themes here and give you a little bit of a teaser of what's in the paper, we've put together a very exciting panel to discuss the main pieces of the paper. So with that, I'd like to introduce the panel to everyone. I'd like to ask the panel to join me here. Andre Forsberg, co-founder and executive chairman of H55. You can give him an applause. Nicolas Chabert, SVP of the Harris Aircraft Division and CEO of the Harris Aircraft Korea Aircraft. Saskia Horsch, Head of Global Regulatory and Public Affairs at Lilium. Oliver Reinhardt, Chief Risk and Certification Officer at Volocopter. And last but not least, Mr. David Salar, Head of General Aviation and VTOL at EASA. So thank you for joining. And we'll kick it off. I'll just give a very brief highlight of the main parts of the paper, and then we'll dive into a panel discussion. So as I mentioned, the paper is the result of months of work by many of GAMA's members. And on funding in specific, we emphasize the need to recognize the specificities of this sector, the longer return on investment calculations that need to be applied, especially as many of the manufacturers active in the advanced air mobility field are startups, So we are asking financial institutions and regulators to recognize this and modify state aid rules that allow access to funding in Europe, to modify the way that European institutionalized banks apply their lending practices. So these are some of the main recommendations there. On supply chains, we emphasize the importance of exploring synergies with the automotive industry and other sectors that are already kind of active in this area, of building a strong recycling infrastructure in Europe as well, and making sure that we work with trusted partners globally to have the right agreements in place to ensure that the critical raw materials are here so we can manufacture with ease. And on regulatory and policy items, we acknowledge the great work being done by initiatives like ASEA and the need for those to continue. We acknowledge the opportunities presented by some European regulations, such as the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, and the opportunities that opens to fund the rollout of infrastructure, because that's also crucial for electric aviation to take foot and to become more of a day-to-day reality over the next years. And of course, we talk about EASA as well, and the need for EASA to be well funded, to be able to do its job, and in order to be able to collaborate internationally to keep that good international cooperation, to ensure that standards in this emerging field are as aligned as possible. So with that, I'm going to ask my panelists to give everyone to give a brief reflection on the paper, and we can maybe start with Andre.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. A few years ago, you may remember that solar impulse flew around the world, and the longest flight we did was 5 days, 5 nights, non-stop over the Pacific Ocean with an electric airplane. So you can imagine how I could, and I became convinced that this technology had a role to play to decarbonize the world of aviation. But I believe in a step-by-step approach, starting with the general aviation application. I have heard the role that general aviation is playing. And starting with existing designs, simple airplanes. And we announced yesterday the beginning of the commercialization of a flight trainer certified CS23 at the beginning of next year. So this is happening. And with this type of application, which are maybe on small aircraft, but will allow us to gather information, data, experience, which will lead this technology to larger application. Now the second step is regional transportation, can be hybrid, but you know, when you can reduce the fuel consumption by 30, maybe up to 50%, it allows us afterwards to use this SAF, which potentially is more expensive to produce and where efficiency is critical. And ultimately, this can lead to the use of hydrogen, to fuel cells. And so this step-by-step approach is extremely important to materialize this technology in the real world. But it takes time. We started to solar impulse in 2003. H55 today, which is the legacy, which is producing electric motors and batteries for this different type of application. We started in 2017, so seven years ago. So it takes time, takes money. You don't have suppliers organized in the proper way around you. And that's basically what we are talking about today, is how to bring this industry to the level where it can compete with existing solutions.
Thank you so much. Very interesting points that we'll get back to, I'm sure. Nicholas?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for setting up the stage, Andre, first with the lead. What I'm interested, of course, in, as Daer and representing somehow the legacy kind of manufacturers, is the fact that, you know, aviation is working globally. And I'm going to give you a little story, but when Alberto Santos Dumont was visiting his good friend Graham Bell in New York, Graham Bell said, aviation is no interest for me because there is no way you can patent, the technology. And I think we need to keep that, aviation is about collaboration. There is no way that we are going to do it with someone who has the brightest idea. That brightest idea 10 years later is probably no longer bright, and somebody else has been able to perfect it in a bit different way. So what you're talking about, the long lead time, is something that we have to be prepared, number one, and we have to connect the dots. So for us, at the end, there's no other thing than having a certified product. So if it is not certified, it is not a product. It is something, could be an idea, could be a prototype, but that's where we work tightly, and we believe that with our regulators, and of course here in Europe, EASA, it is important that we can channel this venture. So there's two things that are important in the paperwork. We are fundamentally convinced that, if you look at what the French government and French GDC has done, we can take some good examples. Research is something that is very difficult because diplomatically we can cross some borders sometimes, especially, with cousins and friends, across the Atlantic. It's hard, but we have to kind of, have a channel that works very well. And we believe that simplification, FP8 or any of the vehicles to the research is important. And we believe that EASA is, in fact, a way to channel that research funding so that we can liaise to the practical side of, is it going to become a product someday? So that's for one thing in terms of, the funding. The other thing is we need to evolve and to the paper that was adopted on the 10th of April, so that now there is a certification path, but it's only a path. We need to now enter the details, and the devil is in the details. And we have to change the mindset. We are not going to invent sustainable aviation on the basis of what happened in the last century. We can try to not repeat and reinvent the wheel, and I agree with you, certified vehicle today are a good path, but we need to think very different. So when with Christophe Robin, that is heading the efforts for me, is looking at how are we going to become a product. Well, first off, it could be simple answer is impossible. And if we just stay there, we are not going to make any progress. If we just take one idea, it's not going to be a product either. It is going to be a combination of some technology breakthrough. It is going to be also some change of lines where we are going to evolve. So when we look at this new regulation, there is not any fields that bridge. We need to sync every chapter of the regulation together. So we believe that that is going to be the result, and it's going to be a long road, and that has started. Now the big challenge for all of us is to be able to introduce a product to the market, and introducing a product to the market is to make sure that the market is buying the product.
And for that, of course, there was a whole need for infrastructure as well, and so that supply chains and all the kind of ancillary parts are also touched on in the paper, as is of course the importance of making sure that road to the market can be as efficient and as effective as possible. Thank you. Saskia, would you?
Can I just? I want to come back to the root of the paper that GAMA published today, which is electric aviation. The benefit of this new technology cannot be emphasized enough, and I think in many member states and at EU level, it's not on the radar of policymakers yet, and I think we need to bring it there, which was the starting idea of this paper. Now, electric aviation, when you look at the potential it has with battery technology that we already have today, which we will be using for our initial product, which is we're launching commercially in 26. You can already, this is great. You can cover 170 kilometers, 175 in the beginning. But if you think it through, and you can see it from the automotive, you can cover 1,000, 2,000 kilometers with battery technology in the next 15 years. And this is technology that is already here, right? And when you think that 80% of all passenger flights are in the 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers, then it makes a real difference in terms of decarbonization. So we really have a great potential here to help, the European Union, which is so much focused on decarbonization and meeting the Green Deal. That we need to bring this technology to the forefront. Now, the companies that work on electric aviation, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, are companies like Volocopter, like Lilium, like those who are signatories to the paper, who usually don't have a product to cross-subsidize. Now, you all know that aviation products are super expensive. They have super long lead times. Yeah, we talk 8 to 10 years. If you're pre-revenue, you don't have a product, well then good luck to finance that. Most of us are, a great majority privately funded, but to make it to commercialization, we really need public support. We also need public support because it is a sign to the world, yeah? If you look across the pond, some of our GAMA members benefit from the fact that the US, for example, has pretty early on understood that this is a strategic sector and they're putting real money on the table. Then we see how this can work. And I think in Europe we need to have a similar logic. The reason why it doesn't work in the EU, where we cannot get access to funding, is because as the kind of companies that we are, we fall through the cracks. Yeah? In Europe, the system is built on SMEs. Yeah? So SMEs will get money. There'll be tons of R&D funding pots, but we're like beyond that stage. Certainly for those companies that are shortly before commercialization, there's just nothing around. There will always be hurdles. Member states cannot put big money tickets on the table because their state aid rules are pretty strict. Yeah. And so whatever we look at, whatever level of funding pot, it's just not accessible. And then as an investor, if I would look at the global scene, I would say, well, why should I invest in Europe? I mean, the states don't invest here, so why don't just go to the US, because they will make it. So I think if we here in Europe want to make sure that we remain leading in technology, leading in aviation, and also supporting the emerging deep tech company scene, then we really have to change the mindset, and we have to change create instruments that allow us to get to the end and be able to sell our products or operate our products. And some very simple things can be done. Like there are already some instruments there, yeah? So I look at the EIC Accelerator, which is a really great funding tool at EU level. Well, the problem is that it's limited to a certain number of employees, 500 I think it is. Well, we need 500 engineers to build the aircraft, so we, as you can imagine, have more employees than that, so we're not eligible. Then there's other programs like Innovation Fund. It's limited to bigger aircraft, so we fall between the cracks. And then when you look at member state opportunities, most of the programs you have to prove that you're not a failing company, which for a deep tech that every 6 months has to look for money, do funding rounds, is obviously a bit difficult, right? So we always get into problems with this criteria that was set up by EU state aid law, undertaking difficulty, which was meant for a completely different nature. And so, the call with this is really to go to the EU level and say, you have to change some of the rules if you want to stay as a leader in tech and innovation.
And these are potentially easy fixes, as you pointed out as well. They just require a change in the mindset and to realize it's a part of the solution. Oliver?
Yeah, so as we heard before, we are at a time of a transition. We are getting our new executive director, we have the European Parliament elections, the Commission is about to change, that's happening. But there is also other elements of the transition. Of all those fancy projects we were talking of, the first ones are becoming a reality now. So when I look at our product, the Volocity, we are in the middle of getting the product certified, and we are convinced to becoming operative still this year under type certificate, using first time EASA's SC-VTOL, which we are using already now, of course, for all our flight testing that we are doing in crewed and uncrewed configurations, but then getting into type certificate, getting it into operation. So it's getting real now. That's also one piece of the transition. And as we heard before, now it's really where the interesting questions come up. And that's where the interesting last hurdles need to be taken into that. So with this, taking this example, taking also what all you guys are doing in there, very clearly here with the European industry, we are at the forefront of this new technology. And we were in a lucky position that we could get to this, thanks to also EASA supporting these initiatives, creating room and developing the regulations for this, the operating regulations we just heard before that were approved now by the Commission. That's a perfect example for this, how rapidly in the end this went through and was prepared, and is really preparing this grounds. But now it's a time to make sure that we are not losing this advantage that we have achieved with all this intensive work by industry, by authorities, by everybody involved in here. The one thing is for sure the financing issues that Saskia elaborated on. There is not much to add to what you said. I can fully endorse everything that you said. We see the very same things. The other element is then on the regulatory side, we really need to continue on what we were doing there. And I mentioned already what EASA was doing to establish an SCV to establish these operating rules. That was drawing a lot of effort, of course. Other stuff had to stand back behind this. But we are not done yet. We are just at the beginning of really implementing. The next steps still need to be taken. And that will be an interesting question on how can EASA finance that continuation of that work. And that's also one of the elements that's nicely worked out in the paper, where the funding streams at the moment come from. And we really have to question, is that sufficient, or do we need to elaborate other ways of going into that? Because when then on the one side, we keep EASA working on these elements and really doing the necessary next steps to enable our new technologies. The next element is then how do we get this out into the world to get it harmonized. Very clearly, one thing we observe, the different aviation authorities around the globe, they are looking very closely and really taking everything that was developed and by EASA and put in place there as a guideline to adopt it and to piggyback onto that. That's already a good step, but we unfortunately experience that we are not that synchronized, especially on those products that we both are working on. And there we need to really overcome this now. How do we do the harmonization? That takes effort. That takes effort that needs to be brought in. And again, looking at what Saskia mentioned, us as the new players on the industry, pre-revenue deep tech companies, fighting for every euro and cent on a monthly basis to be able to really make it to profitability at some point in time, fingers crossed. We only can put also a limited amount of effort into supporting this. We're doing already a lot, as much as we can, but more needs to come there in order to secure that we get harmonized. And I also had the chance yesterday at the Amsterdam Drone Week to speak a bit together with the ICAO colleagues on what can be helped, for example, also from that end. But it starts here. It starts here in Europe also, and that's what is nicely worked out also in the paper. What are the steps that we can take to support this, to prepare the grounds that there is some meaningful debate going on?
So it sounds like we're all aligned. We can go and talk to the Commission together with the EASA maybe.
Yes, of course. So first of all, on EASA, we are committed to support innovation. I think we've gone through the way eVTOL, electrical aviation, with the publication of the SeVTOL, the 19 special condition electric and hybrid power plant systems. We are working on hydrogens, but still in parallel, you know, what's the daily business of aviation is 3,000 projects. Some of them are very large also, that we have to support with around 270 people, technical people. And it's a daily challenge. If you see the amount of work needs behind an entire code and the new regulatory framework for operational aspects on eVTOL, it's huge, a huge amount of people, and obviously you have to do some trade-offs at the end of the day. And if I take the fees and charge, that we are 70% funded privately, 30% by the Commission. If you take a small aircraft, I think it's 15,000 euro per year. You know, obviously, my department is losing money, bleeding out of it. and we are not looking at commercial things. It's really the reality. You need money to fund only the people to work on that. So there are works to be done, and we are still not there with the current funding scheme of the entire ecosystem. After, I would like to rebound on the international aspects, which is key for this industry. We all know since decades, and it is really for a couple of reasons. First, we had some political impacts, if you have an election somewhere that is driving a completely new mindset, it has an impact on the relationships, on the way of working, on the way to collaborate, and we have to be aware of that. And we'll see at the end of the year what's going on. It's critical for the aviation industry. It's a vote, but at the end of the day, there will be a huge impact on the way we can move ahead towards more collaborations. We are putting a lot of effort since a couple of years, since we can re-engage even more, since 4 years I would say, with our colleagues from the other side of the ocean. Still, we have not been able to make it happen in a tangible manner. We are working hard. There is good willingness, but then when the devils are always in the details, it's more problematic, and we are trying to make it happen with the small window we have today, that we know at least to converge as much as possible on the key points that are blocking potentially validations. And lastly, it's good to do an aircraft, but if it's electrical, you need also to have the entire ecosystem, because if you are flying to A to B, and general aviation is typically flying A to B and not the big ones, if you don't have your infrastructure to charge your aircraft to fly back, it's somewhere else, and that's what's happening. EASA certified the first electric aircraft 5 years ago now, 2018. Still, it's the only one. And we can wonder the question, what's going on? It seems to be fit for purpose for some training stuff, autonomy can be improved, but if you have to bring your charger and when you want to make from A to B, that's not going to work. And electrical aviation is for me also, I'm a general aviation fan also, the next growth potential of general aviation. Today, if you look at the aircraft, average age, it's something like 40-year-old, I think, in Europe, which is, look at your car and go back 40-year-old before and say, okay, where is my Apple CarPlay or I don't know, Android whatsoever? Where is my Bluetooth things? Where is my autopilot almost over there? But we are at this stage in aviation. I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's where we are. And we have been living on that since 40 years. This electrical hybrid aviation in the GA side is the key to make people dream again about aviation, and especially the young generations. If we lose this chance, we are losing a lot of key people that will enable this industry to grow. And for me, it's one very important thing. That's why also we were speaking about fundings and research projects. We are also involved in research projects via Clean Aviation. And EASA, and especially Alain Leroy, he's not in the room, and myself, we fought very much to keep GA in the funding schemes, because we are engineers, and we know that you can only scale up technology. Scaling down is, you cannot develop a 1 megawatt electrical engine when you have already difficulty to set up a 150 kilowatt. So that's where we are, and that's where we need to convince people that are not necessarily technical, but are taking key decisions in the fundings, in the directions that are influencing at the end the whole industry. And lastly, it's the cultural change for all of us. Our teams, because it's easy to certify the piston engine, everything is already written, everything is in the books, and we know how to do it. It's not easy to navigate through the new and the odds, and here also my plea is for the industry, go and fly, test, fail fast, together with the learning curves that we all need to share to make it happen. And we are not still here. There in Europe, we are a bit more theoretical than practical in most of the instances. And that's a big difference to make it, this industry move to the next stage, which is going to be sustainable and hopefully a big lever to grow again this industry.
Thank you. And There's a lot of synergies as well, which also the paper mentions. If you mentioned the need for infrastructure, for instance, and especially as we heard about the range of the initial fully electric aircraft. I mean, that makes them ideal, for instance, to connect peripheral regions to larger hubs, where you also desperately need infrastructure for other kind of purposes, for charging electric vehicles and so on. And we had touched on that in the paper as well. So we also heard during the discussion that we're all aligned on the importance of EASA and for the agency to be very well funded. We have recommendations on that as well. And of course, since we're talking about general aviation and it being the cradle for all of this innovation, we have very specific recommendations on what specific rules, like that 500-person rule. We have many of those kind of very specific pieces in the paper on what needs to change to give general aviation companies access to those funds that are already out there. Would anyone like to react to anything that's been raised by any of the other panelists? Or to add anything? No? Okay. Oliver? No?
No, I think we well covered all the different elements, and yeah, it's really interesting to see how we all have the same issues, the same challenges, the same problems. So it will be interesting to see how the reactions to this paper will be. And as you mentioned before, it will be a hell of work to really follow up on those elements, that it doesn't get lost. Of course, it's not the only paper that is issued at these times, and we really need to make sure that we stay up front here on the priorities list, because a lot is at stake, and I mean, that's where the innovation happens. It's here. It starts from here, and then it can move into the other segments, into the bigger segments of aviation. And on that perspective, I find it really fascinating when I see talking about the fundings, and of course we probably had the same kinds of discussions in Brussels when we're getting the feedback. Yeah, we are putting a lot of money into SAF. As we know, SAF has a strong lever at the moment, but it will not be the final solution, and there's a lot of challenges associated with it. But onto that novel technology where we are flying completely emission-free on our missions. And when we select the right electric energy to be used, we are really green technology in there. Oh no, that doesn't fit into the scheme. That falls through the cracks. That's hard to believe.
So we'll be working hard to make sure that these cracks are closed and that the money can go where it needs to go.
Yeah, thank you for putting that together. I think I like to underscore the importance of working together, and I think again GAMA is important in that not only a way to collect information for the different members, but to put it out in the form that is really heard. So kudos to you to do that with the paper, of course, and I think we need to go to Brussels and pitch as a world industry and tell the world our story.
And exactly, that we're there to be a part of the solution. We're just there to be next to SAF. SAF. We're not doubting SAF. We also love SAF and want SAF. It's all the same story. It's all the same goal we're driving at.
One last thing to add, aviation. Europe is still one of the leaders in aviation. In the industrial basis, the European one, it's one of the key jewels we still have. If we are losing it, I'm not sure where we are heading towards. And that's really, and aviation has driven a lot of innovation in other sectors afterwards. New materials, new composite, whatever, some alloys, and we are still at the forefront of that. And the new technology may push even the boundary in some instances. Maybe the new sales will come from some guys that are willing, because our need is very specific in aviation in terms of electrical cells. But without that, we are losing also, I think, as a European. So that's really something we deserve to highlight, fight for all together. And really, I'm really keen on participating on that.
Great.
It's interesting to see with H55 we come across the different manufacturers being a provider of technologies and motors and batteries. So basically we follow our customers, and today if I look at the customer portfolio we have, it's more focused on North America. Canada is doing a great job of attracting companies, stimulating the development of these technologies, not just in the air but also on the ground. So the market will go and the companies will go where there is these dynamism. In Europe, we need to develop the networks, not just one company, it's the network of companies which will allow the development of these technologies and the integration of these technologies into clean aviation.
Thank you, and we're wrapping up, maybe one final.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot, you speak out of my soul, right, with what you said. We have to be really careful that companies don't go where they will get the funding, right? Because this is the risk that we see if we want to remain in that areas. And it's ironic. I mean, we are one of the, like Europe is the first region in the world that has now come up with comprehensive rules in AeroOps for our sector, which is remarkable, right? And now we're here, sitting here thinking, will we actually make it? Because we're not getting the support. While on the other side of the pond, you know, they're not there, totally not there yet. They will get there, but the funding is not the same. It's not, you know, it's not the problem. So I think we're really, I mean, and I'm hopeful that AERO will push, as the industry will push for that, to really make the Europe, the e-politicians understand that. I mean, there is a lot of risk right now.
Thank you so much to everyone for their contribution. And maybe we can open up to the floor. We're almost out of time, but I'm sure we have time for a few questions, touching on anything that's been said over the last hour. So this panel included, but also anything else that's been said. Does anyone have any questions? Seems like everything was perfectly clear. Everyone is aligned, and we can all go to Brussels together and, and ask for all of these lovely things. Thank you so much for making time to come, and we hope to see you.